the way to the stage, I had the privilege of hearing a story from Todd about what his mom saw during her lifetime. And I think there's potentially just a brief context for that. So I'm going to start with the first question for you is, could you tell everybody about the journey your mom took and potentially how that's impacted your thinking about career, future, and stability?
Sure. So my mother grew up on the island of St. Martin, right? And she came to the United States in 1942. She was 18 years old. She grew up without electricity, okay? Without electricity and what we consider normal plumbing, right? So she left the island when she was 18 years old on her own, took a sailing ship to Puerto Rico, and then got on a 4-engine, propeller engine airplane and flew into New York City. So you can imagine, as an 18-year-old girl, never having seen anything other than the island of St. Martin, flying into New York City, flying into Kennedy Airport. She grew up without electricity, and she flew into one of the biggest cities in the world. And today, she does email. She's 82 years old. She does email. She has a tough time surviving without her iPad, day in and day out. She streams music. She exchanges photographs. She pings me on chat just to let me know that I haven't called her. So just think about that amount of change, right? Going from no electricity to where she is today. It's truly remarkable.
So I'd ask Lisa May and Carolyn is, what are the experiences you had, particularly young, that you think impacted your decision to go into the innovative high-tech space that you're in now?
Well, as you all know, that I am a nurse, and I worked in the critical care area. So as a student nurse, you do your rounds, and you get to do different things. So you do labor and delivery, you do critical care, you do medical surgical. When I hit the critical care units, I knew I was home because of all of the technology and all of the equipment that was needed to help care for patients. And having to learn that got me really interested. And when I went on to do postgraduate, I sought this area as a potential for me, and it has really turned out to be an experience. And having that clinical background and then understanding what technology can do for the patients, it really drove me. And so it really started in nursing school when I walked into a critical care unit and saw the ventilators, the bedside monitors, and all of these things that were being used to care for patients.
You?
Yes, thank you. For me, the most defining moment for me that drove me towards the path in healthcare was with my grandmother. And I still remember I was in first grade and she had Alzheimer's. But the greatest complication that she dealt with was osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is when your bones get weak and they fracture. Sometimes they can just fracture for no reason at all. You could just be sitting. Well, she fractured her hip and just really struggled to communicate with us around the things that were going on with her hip. But she fell. And in addition to that, after the fracture, there was just nothing that they could do to recover her from that fracture. So for me, right now in healthcare, one of the biggest solutions that Cerner has is around falls risk precaution, and it actually helps the patients for us to alert once again that there's falls that could potentially be happening with these patients, which that just railroads into all kinds of other complications. But my grandmother was so near and dear to me, and I just decided at that early age that I have to do something in healthcare because here she is, she means so much to me, and there are so many things that could have been done to prevent her going down that path. as opposed to what we could do to have had a much longer time with her, walking, cooking. I still remember her baking tea cakes, all the things that really meant a lot to me. So it was me and my tie to my grandmother.
So before I continue to ask questions, thank you, are there any questions from you of this distinguished panel? Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My question to you is, what is the hardest lesson that you learned in your quest to pursue technology and its innovation?
So we'll leave that there. So what is the hardest lesson that you've learned in innovation in the healthcare in your careers?
Well, it has been buy-in from my experience with folks that work in the hospitals, in the units, caring for patients. They usually have control of that scene, and having another layer of support come in through the technology, it had a feeling of big brother. So to overcome that perception of that big brother watching, as opposed to this is someone here to help you and collaborate with you, was a big challenge. And it's still a perception that we try to mitigate every day. But yeah, I would say that was it. And the buy-in that this was really a useful piece of, way to care for patients. So.
I would say that the toughest challenge is change. With all innovation, with all new ideas and so forth, it does require people to do things differently, and you run into resistance in many aspects of it. So while you may be incredibly enthusiastic about this innovation or this piece of technology that you may be bringing, to an organization, you have to be careful in how you approach folks and helping them understand why the need for change is really important and how this can help them do their jobs better.
And for me, the hardest lesson was that more is not better. We have a tendency to throw more patient caregivers at a problem when really you just need the right person to make sure that the information that you need to make the right decision at the right time is there. So to me, it's the right person, the right time, with the right information.
Next question. Could you pass the mic over to wherever? Right here.
Hi, my name is Eunice Kofi. I am founder and chief chemist for Nweki, which is an innovative health and beauty company for people of color. A lot of times with technology, we always think about more of the computer app side or web development. I'm coming from more of the pharmaceutical therapeutic development. How do you merge the data that you're collecting with the development of therapeutics? And I'm more interested on the dermatology side because there's such a lack of information on skin of color and the common disorders that are found amongst people of color.
Give it a try. So from the therapeutic side of it, one of the things that I found is that there is more research that is occurring now that in people of color and skin issues and challenges. There are more specialists now that are actually specializing into surgical procedures and things like that. But the bottom line is when you talk about therapeutics, there are so many more natural treatments that can be done to help with people of color with their skin conditions. But from an IT perspective, there are a couple of databases that an associate of mine has actually told me about to help with some of that therapeutic knowledge sharing. So I'll be glad if we get your name, I'll be glad to follow up and share that with you.
Sure, thank you.
Next question. We're going to pass the mic back.
I have a question.
So I didn't see it. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hillary Lopez, and I'm a student here at MDC. This question is for Ms. Williams. The technology that you're presenting us today, did it start in the United States, and does this technology have in other countries, or will it spread?
Well, yes and yes. The technology started in the late 90s, early 2000, specifically to the EICU, by two physicians from Johns Hopkins. And they were addressing a problem of intensivist coverage. So there's a shortage of intensivists. These are critical care doctors that are trained specifically to work with ICU patients or critical care patients. And at the time, over 10,000 were needed and only 2,000 were available in the entire United States. So they developed this technology, and I don't know if you were here earlier when Carolyn talked about predictive modeling or analytics. They developed a software that they were able to track and trend ICU patients and then place intensivists remotely. So it does exist, and I know that in the United States alone, there are about 40 hubs that have this technology that cover about 13% of ICU beds. And in all over the globe, there are different models that mimic this same type of technology. I know China has a very big tele-ICU model.
And there are actually a few hospitals here in the United States that do telemedicine for like the Caribbean and some other countries.
My turn? Okay. All right. Good morning. I just wanted to ask a question about healthcare and dealing with the youth, with just education. Like, I remember back in, I say around 4th grade, you know, you get a cut or something, you go to the nurse, you know. All right, but there's more serious things besides a cut that a kid may have, you know, but it's not really looked at because it's not really nurses or anything in schools anymore. And I was wondering if there was like any ideas of adding that back, you know, but in a more way where technology is implemented, you know.
So funny you should say that. There are tele-nurses in schools, or I don't know, for the lack of a better word, e-school nursing. So they would have, say, a telepresence room, which would be the clinic, and the student can go into that clinic and remotely connect to a nurse practitioner or to a physician for anything during the school day. So it's out there. I'm not exactly sure what software is being used, but it's there. That's a great question.
Yeah, and I can add to that. The Department of Health and Human Services has a whole initiative now around education and prevention, and they're starting with additional video information to where that it'll be available on mobile devices and things like that. So even outside of your school nurse, there's going to be an opportunity coming in the future to where there may be even an app to where kids could have access to that type of information.
So to close and since that's saying time up, I would want to add 2 comments. One is that face of healthcare is going to be so profoundly different in 10 years from now. So be a little bit like Wayne Gretzky, think about where the puck's going to be. But I have little doubt people will be seeing their doctor from home. Only the things that really require the personal touch will require going in. Right now we're doing primary care visits by telecommunications. And so things really are going to change. There are apps now that can do the equivalent of something close to an electrocardiogram, an EKG. There'll be sensors and Apple Watches that tell you what your blood sugar is without having to stick your finger. So things are going to be really different, with a lot of opportunity for business, a lot of opportunity for doing the right thing for patients. And so with that, keep your eyes open. It's a very rapidly changing field. And my last comment, my co-panelists may have additional thoughts, is I would really want to compliment you for your questions and your interest. Healthcare is an amazing, amazing career. I know that's not the choice, that's not the reason for this meeting, but it's a place where if you want to be innovative and entrepreneurial, you can, and it's also of tremendous service to your fellow persons. So with that, any additional? I'd want to thank these panelists for their contributions to what we do.